so many times in the past few years, I have had to grow up. Like the first, second, and third time I read about kids being shot in schools. And when we all learned about the lead in the water in Flint. And every time that I read or see about the aftermath of climate-fueled disasters, we've had to grow up one too many times. Speaker Pelosi, Democratic leadership, we are asking you to grow up.
Today we're joined by Jeremy Ornstein. He's an activist with the Sunrise Movement, and he is probably one of the most vocal climate change activists in the country, I would say. He's a freshman at Harvard right now, and he went viral, I believe a few years ago, when he protested outside of Nancy Pelosi's office on behalf of the Green New Deal. So we welcome Jeremy and we wish him luck on his future endeavors in the world of climate change activism with the Sunrise Movement. So welcome, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us. Jeremy just finished a long day of work. He works full-time now for the Sunrise Movement. He's a climate change activist, and he's probably one of the most active citizens, and probably one of my greatest inspirations, I would say, in the climate justice movement. So thank you for joining us.
Jack, I'm just going to say, I've seen you show up on Facebook here and there, talking to people, doing work. I remember I met you for the first time at a young people's call a couple of days ago and heard great questions from you. And so what an honor for me to join you on this podcast.
Thank you so much. So, we're both young people. Obviously, I would say that it's accurate that both of us got involved in politics for necessity, not because we wanted to. Why did you decide to get involved with the Sunrise Movement? And how do you stay so passionate?
Yeah, great questions, man. I think it comes down to our stories, and we can never stop saying them.
Yes.
And I think about my grandparents and learning about how my grandparents survived the Holocaust and remembering the time that I saw my grandma's memoirs or the time I learned that there were gas chambers used to kill the Jews, and the times I felt the chills and the whole responsibility on me to bring justice into this world and defend people's lives. And then the time my dad called me 2018 saying, you know what's going on, meet? No, what, Dad? You know what's going on? There's a shooter in a synagogue in Pittsburgh shooting Jews right now and taking my hat off my head and yelling. And it was because President Trump had stirred up all this hatred around climate refugees at the border and inspired someone to shoot people in synagogue. And so I used the language I had to grow up when I was learning about my family's history, when I found that history intertwined in our moment. I had to grow up. And I think about when kids in Flint had to drink poisoned water. Think about when kids had to get shot in schools. I think about how youth unemployment is double that of regular unemployment. And I think about our generation having to grow up and face the challenges. And so you speak of necessity. I think of my high school I graduated from 2 years ago that just can't deal with the heat. The AC's broken. The window fan doesn't work when it gets too hot because it is getting too hot. You can't learn calculus. Your classmates having a heat stroke. So we have to do this work. And so there's a push to be passionate, to be heard through the slogans and the bullshit from lobbyists, all of that. And there's the twist of it, which is that when I think about Passover, which is a holiday Jewish people celebrate, and the liberation from Egypt, we tell the story. We're commanded by God to tell the story every year of leaving Egypt. And that when the Jews get to the Red Sea and part the waters and get to the other side, Miriam starts doing some stuff with the tambourine and people start dancing and singing.
Yes.
And I think about the life that my grandma and grandpa got to build when they got out of Auschwitz.
Yes.
And I think about the joy of singing songs of revolution with my friends in the halls of Congress.
Yes.
And I think the joy of a high-speed freaking rail broadband.
Yes.
I mean, man, a good job where you can be helping the people you love, rebuilding your school, teaching kids, taking care of a family member. These things are hard, no doubt. You got to grow up, you got to bear some weight, and there could be a little jump to our step. And so there's some sweetness in revolution, and there's some
Yes.
sweetness in building a future that is worth it. And so that's what I'm going to choose to be passionate about, and the other stuff I'm going to be sadly passionate about. That's my answer for you. And what resonates for you in that?
A lot does, because there is joy and hope, and I have experienced activist burnout before. It's really easy to, because these topics that we're talking about, the topics that you mentioned, and the pressure that you must have felt to make the future better, it can be soul crushing sometimes. And it's really easy to get emotional. You talked about the violence against Jewish people and the rise of anti-Semitism. But the act of hope, the act of getting involved, meeting new people, it saves you. It saves you. You cannot get through activism alone. And how have you avoided activist burnout? And I'm assuming it's, by making friends. And also, what are some of your favorite memories?
Man, Jack, you're asking it. For any young people out there listening to this podcast, you're right that's the question. And yeah, just like the biggest thing, I know this is not your question, but I'm just going to say this to people out there. Biggest thing is be authentic with others, and be authentic with yourself. And so that's why it's important to know some of the experiences that call you to care, and share those with people and listen to other people's. So after this or during this, I want to know what makes you take. But I'll say real quick, when you're tired, and you're going on a run, and you're exhausted, you can either run harder and maybe pull something, or like have a asthma attack on the side of the road, or you can take a break and walk a little. And so if you're doing some organizing, if you're posting every day, if you've led 2 marches and you're exhausted, take a break, walk a little. That's natural. Second idea, play some music, listen to some music, do some painting, do some reading, read about the issues a little bit, talk to people about the issues, pray if you want. So there are all these ways to tap into what we care about and do it with other people. And, I think about the impatience and the urgency. The IPCC report stated with the deadline, the U.S. has like 10 years to decarbonize. And yet, I think we've got to do that 10 years with grace and with ease. And that's the way we're going to get there. So people should really feel that sense of like abundance. We have the people, and the wisdom and the ideas are going to come, but we can't rush it. We can rush it a little bit, but not that much. So take breaks. And then when you ask about friends, I think about like with Sunrise Movement, I lived in a movement house. So this was a house of all these people working on a race to elect a champion who'd create jobs over pipelines, and doing a little direct action stuff. And we would just cook tofu and veggies and beans and rice, and we'd sit on the porch talking about our lives, and we would host weird recruitment parties for strangers, and some people would get a little weirded out and go away. And so one time a dad dropped someone off and said, "Hey, come back." And we thought that the dad thought we were weird, and that was so true.
Yeah.
And
well, it might be scary, because it almost reminds me of like hippie houses from the 60s. But yeah, it's awesome. Like, I wish I could have lived in a movement house. And how did you find that, by the way? Like, how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, well, I wanted to go to college, and I remember in a motel visiting a school, watching a video of Emma Gonzalez called BS on the NRA.
Yeah.
And I was active in the High School Democrats of America, and I thought,
HSDA,
baby. I thought I'm gonna take a break, and then I saw that video, and I thought my generation is like broken the dam, and the flood of young people is coming, and it's gonna water the damn crops of democracy. So I gotta take a break from school, and so I found Sunrise Movement, and I just started throwing down, and the movement house was awesome. And I think, Jack, that people are lonely. Our age are lonely, and this pandemic,
social media too.
Social media,
it's
so easy to be lonely, and so easy to feel like people don't know you, and you don't have close friends, and like life can feel gray. Even when especially when we're doing organizing, life can feel gray. And so there was just a magic of like being with people who danced in the puddles with me on my birthday, and then went and knocked a bunch of doors. And when that was done, told stories about grumpy people at the door, annoying people, really awesome people. And I think that community organizing is a way for our generation to find each other again. And, you know, this pandemic is so dark. I think about this summer, and I'm trying to think of good names for this summer, like summer of abundance, summer of hugs, summer of, I don't know what it's going to be, but how do we get out of this loneliness? How do we do it? How do we make sure our organizing is a way to do that?
Right. Yeah, no, and you put it really well. A lot of, like, for me, I have found community in activism. I wouldn't have been able to come out as gay without, you know, gaining the support of my friends that I met through politics and, you know, March for Our Lives that I got involved with in my sophomore year. And I guess my question to you is, like, you've been working on the outside, somewhat, pushing establishments, pushing the government to enact bold climate change legislation. What do you want to see from Joe Biden right now? If you could have 2 minutes in the Oval Office with him, what would you say so he passes climate change legislation?
I love that, Jack. That's a great question. And I'm just going to say how beautiful that you could find community that could support you to come out. That's so awesome. I want to be in communities that are as free and encouraging as that.
Yes.
Let me think what to say about to Joe. Joe's my friend. Joe's my old friend. I don't know why I'm saying that, but it feels
good old Uncle Joe. Everyone knows him, right?
Uncle Joe. Let me think for a sec.
This is a high stakes meeting. You've got 2 minutes. You got it.
Well, I'll stumble into it. Let me stumble into it a little bit. Okay, I'm thinking about when Abraham Lincoln summoned us to listen to our better angels, which was emancipation and abolition of slavery. And I'm thinking about when JFK summoned us to this project of a nation, asking what we could do. And I'm thinking about all of the organizers and leaders in our nation who called us to do something. And gosh, so many. Yeah, Martin Luther King, who asked us to dream with him and not just accept America like failing to act on its promise again and again. And when a national leader can do something like Amanda Gorman did at the inauguration, I love her words. New dawn blooms as we free it. If only there's light enough to be it. And we have to be the light. That's what Amanda Gorman said at the inauguration. And I think, like Joe Biden, you cannot hope to transform our government without creating powerful political momentum behind you. You cannot hope to say the right things without a movement that can push every member of the Senate and the Congress, without being the light. You can't just say, Joe Biden, oh, I think there's a lot of good things. I think there's a lot of good things. You must be the light for the American people. And he did that when he said to people in who are unionizing in Alabama, Amazon Union, just the beginning of what will be huge unionization for America. When he said that's good and Amazon shouldn't get in the way of that, he did that. And maybe he didn't do it so much when he reacted to the murder of Dante Wright, and he said like he just so much emphasized this call for peace without, it seemed like, acknowledging the absence of peace in our nation because Black people are being killed by police. And so I think Joe Biden called for $10 trillion, $1 trillion a year on infrastructure to stop climate catastrophe. Do that, and you'll just witness the wave of people who see honest, bold government, and they're going to follow the heck out of you and make your political promises inevitable and unstoppable. So that's what I would say. Jack, is somehow don't just see the light, be the light, and summon us to our task of making the government work for us. Fuck.
Yes, Jeremy, that was great. Thank you.
Well,
are you a preacher? You should be a preacher or a pastor.
Thanks.
That was amazing. Oh my God. You could lead any protests. Please, I'm gonna ask you to come to a few protests with me.
For the podcast people, I'm blushing. If they can't see it, but I'm blushing.
Yes. Praying to God right now. I wanted to ask you a question about okay, so if America moves forward with the Green New Deal, maybe one day, just I, I'm trying to imagine that future. How can we get other countries to act? How do we incentivize um, poorer nations to invest in new energy? How can the United States help?
Well, I'm actually going to answer that halfway through an organizer's answer, which
Okay.
is to say, oftentimes as an organizer, people will say, and I appreciate the way you're asking this question. Other people will try and ask a difficult policy question to defuse an organizer or defuse a young person trying to ask for change. And so I've been like, hey, why, in years past, why don't we do a Green New Deal? And people say, yeah, but other countries will never do that. Or
Right.
what's your plan on this?
They
And
use it as a way to like demean the actual policy.
yeah. And I think it's great for all of us to have a little bit of doubt about our policy, but also that when a young person calls for change, it creates more room for scholars, people who are curious, policy writers to then say, well, this young person's calling for change. Let's delve deeper into the policy itself. So when we call for a Green New Deal, then we get think tanks writing about job proposals and carbon plans. And in the same way, when the federal government acts, it makes so much room for so many others to act. And I'm thinking about the idea to decarbonize the federal post office trucks. And that if the government can say to businesses, if you are creating zero carbon engines and vehicles, we are going to buy that. And how much that ripples through all of manufacturing to say, okay, federal government has got our backs on this. And so if the federal government takes that first step to say we're going to invest in this kind of energy, in this kind of technology, or R&D, if the federal government, that's like how the computer was invented, right?
Yes.
It's because when we were fighting the wars, we put all this money into computer, and so many other technologies were developed because
the GPS came from that. Yes.
And so when the federal government takes that first step, I mean, one of the most powerful entities on the face of this planet starts nudging the world follows. Just like when we organize for bold politicians, the rest of the sort of establishment follows us. And so that's one answer to your question about global leadership is US starts moving, other countries move. Second thing I'll say is I think that maybe a few things. I'm thinking like when we fail to invest in other countries, what a terrible violation of our own principles that is, and what it does to dishonor ourselves. And when we see people dying, it's like, screw, yeah. Then I'm just ashamed to be a human on a planet when I see people dying, when boats are overturning in the ocean because people are starving, or in our southern border when people are dying in the desert. I'm ashamed to be a human. And my grandparents were telling me, go help those people, save lives. Yeah. And the other thought is, and I'm also thinking of like the chaos of the Syrian war and how much the cost of that for US, for Europe, because, and it's connected to droughts leading to famine, leading to people, to like society crumbling a little bit, connected to climate change.
And climate change is so intersectional. Native American women are this is an example of how climate change is intersectional. Native American women are disappearing because Native American communities, I just read a report, I think it was in the Atlantic, are forced to move into smaller and more condensed spaces where domestic violence is likelier to increase because of climate change. That's one example. Or the immigrants coming to our border right now because of climate change. Yes, it's so intersectional, and we don't talk about that enough. Climate racism too.
Wow. Well, you're right that it's shaking everything like a big snow globe, and so the things that were already messed up are getting more messed up, and that's brutal for so many human beings, and it'll just get worse for all of us. I think the opposite of that is when we invest in, say, like traditional indigenous knowledge And when we invest in tribal communities and leaders, then we get investments back as a society.
Yes.
Because the people on the margins are just waiting with hidden talents to offer to everyone. And so
And I'm happy, I'm happy Congress added in the recent coronavirus relief plan about, I think it was either it was $40 million to save Native American languages.
Yo.
Yeah, so that's a great investment.
Right. And that stuff counts, and we're going to see that back. We're
Right.
all going to see that back. And so you ask about for giving money to other countries. I think like after World War II, we did a whole Marshall Plan where we invested in Europe that was destroyed. And then we had amazing Europe as trading partners. It's like when your friend's house, next door house burns down and you help them rebuild. Okay, then you're going over there for a weekend video games and dinner. So, and they're coming over to your place too. So this is the way we build a community and a global community that works. So
Yes.
let's freaking do it. And
Yes.
yeah,
Period. Yes.
that's how we're going to get it done. Period.
Yes. I have another question for you. So I feel guilty a lot about not doing enough to lower my own carbon footprint. I feel like I could be doing more. Can you give our listeners like three ways to significantly lower your carbon footprint? I did just read an article in the New Yorker about how important it is for us to change our diets, to eat less meat. And I know that's one way. But can you tell us a little bit like what you've done or what you recommend to lower our carbon footprint?
Yeah. First, let your guilt go and turn your guilt energy into energy. Buy guilt, have a good trip in a beautiful beach. That's what you can tell your guilt. And then join Sunrise Movement and change the structure, because yeah, I think about like maybe how much harder it is sometimes to operate in a society that's high carbon when you can't get to the store or can't get to the school except by going in a dirty bus or except by riding in your car, driving a car. That's just hard. When you go to the supermarket and you can't find local fresh food and you've got to buy whatever, you feel like you've got to buy the meat that's maybe like what you know how to cook with, whatever.
Yeah, it speaks to the fact that it's harder for lower income people to decrease their carbon footprint. And a lot of times people can't control that.
Yeah. And for everyone, it's just like we're in a world that's high carbon, and it takes a little effort to change it. And I think so. That's the first thought: is let that guilt go to the beach and keep doing what you're doing to change the structures, because then it's going to be easier for everyone. At the same time, I respect, like what do I think? I think that living low carbon and less carbon feels better, and it's like, I don't know, like my girlfriend is my partner. She doesn't eat any meat. She's vegan, and she does it because she thinks eating meat is cruel to animals and destroying Earth and our climate. And it is so delicious to eat tempeh and eat tofu.
Oh my God, it is.
And eat black beans, and you just experiment. So that's the number one thing I would say, because it's delicious and fun, is change your diet and don't eat meat, because you're just going to get a kick out of it. And then you can take a break from your hard organizing and burnout to go eat a delicious tempeh food. What do you think of that?
I like that. I'm down for that. Yes.
Okay, so great activist burnout break is go vegan for 2 weeks and see how it feels, and don't do any work. That's one idea. Second idea.
That's what I'll do. Yes.
Okay, good. Second idea, go on adventures in this post-pandemic world by biking around and taking public transportation. Again, this might be hard if you don't live in an area where that's possible, but if it is, what a fun way to take a break. Ride a bike.
Get exercise in, and you get to experience nature. Probably.
Yeah. And then third way, I don't know, I think you could have a fun idea. I think there are other thoughts like, don't go in an airplane. And that could be hard if you're having to go somewhere far. So
take public transportation as much as possible. And that's one thing I'm excited about the infrastructure bill is that
So
hopefully when we get high-speed rail, we lower the usage of airplanes, and that could have a huge impact on the environment. Oh my God, the
yeah,
amount of pounds of carbon output we would save in the atmosphere. Wow.
that would be so cool. And then it's not about asking everyday people to pay a huge amount, like spend a lot of time in the train, although trains are awesome and beautiful and cool. It's just a way of society, of like the government taking that first step in us and us doing our thing.
Yes, definitely. And it would just be so awesome to have high-speed rail, honestly. Like
So awesome.
to get to Boston in like 2 hours from Philadelphia, like yes.
Dude, to get to Philadelphia in 2 hours from Boston.
Yes, can you
What a
please come back down? Can you tell us a little bit about what you did in Pennsylvania? Because you've done so much. And what are you up to now?
Yeah, okay. I'll start with Pennsylvania. To say amazing, amazing revolution going on in Pennsylvania. And there was a Mariner East 2 pipeline, which was really dangerous, explosive, and like the investment wasn't going to the community. And so Danielle Otten and Katie Muth ran for state rep and state senate. And me and like 6 other people went to Chester County to work full time for these politicians, political leaders, while also doing some organizing for Sunrise in the process. And just knocked a lot of doors and learned from people and talked to people who really needed jobs and felt really like suspicious of plans to stop the pipeline project, and talked to people who felt ignored by government completely and ignored by politicians. And I remember talking to people who were just so pissed at the whole thing, and just me feeling like, okay, a little bit of my spark and my like hope and idealism, that's not the tool here. I've got to listen seriously to people saying how frustrated they are and how sad they are, and then relate to them on that. Because what I was frustrated about was these really rich corporate executives, Sanacore, getting a pass from politicians and lobbying like crazy and giving campaign contributions. And so sometimes it was like relating on that note of, damn, you're right, this is hard. And the seat that had been held by the GOP elite for so long went to Danielle Otten and Katie Muth. And now Danielle.
I love Katie, yes.
Oh, you know Katie? Oh, she's so fierce.
She is, yes.
Now they're fierce advocates. And so, Jack, you know this as much as anyone, the inside and the outside game together. Because without Danielle and Katie, we're just a bunch of kids yelling on the sidewalk, which can be amazing and unstoppable. But with them in there, we're so much higher. We've got an edge in the seats of power, and just one way to keep growing. So that's a little what I did in Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much. Any last words of advice for young people who don't really know how to get involved in the Sunrise Movement? Where can they go? Are there hubs they can join?
Yeah. Good question. Let me think. I'm thinking about a few things. I'm thinking there's something that Sunrise. One thing I will say, there's something that Sunrise Movement is about to do, that we're about to go public with, that I think will push a little bit further than we have the capacity to dream about right now. And it involves walking a really, really far distance in different places in the country. And it's a kind of journey that a couple Sunrisers will take that I think will be open and invited to many young people if they want to take this summer and use it to do something bold and brave.
I will.
You will?
It's like a pilgrimage, right?
What? A pilgrimage.
Yes.
It's a pilgrimage into this era of good jobs and stopping climate disaster. So, yeah, it's a pilgrimage, and we'll talk more about that. I think basically best thing someone can do is follow Sunrise on Instagram, because they're just beautiful posts on Instagram and stories and videos and things, and just get lost in that a little. Second thing is go to the Sunrise Movement website and go to an onboarding call. And they have these epic onboarding calls where they like bring you through the movement and tell you what to do next. So that's what I'd say.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope all of our listeners are inspired to get involved. You've been one of our most passionate guests. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yay, thank you. Well, to everyone listening, I would just add, if you really want to win serious action against climate change, create millions of good jobs, and take back government for our generation, join Sunrise Movement and elect people and take to the streets, and we can do it together. Hell yeah, we can.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Have a
Hey.
good night.
Bye, Jack.